Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I'm your host Matthew Pejkovic and this is episode number 254. Award season is now upon us, which means Talking Oscars is back to cover all things Oscars and awards related for this 2019-2020 awards season. Joining me now is film critic, movie analyst, and my fellow co-host for Talking Oscars, Mr. Shane Bassett. Shane, I thank you very much for joining me on the podcast.
I say it every year, and we've been doing this for a while, Matt, but it's an absolute pleasure to be welcomed back onto your prodigious podcast that is going so strong. And here we are again, talking our favourite subject, the Oscars. And
this is going to be a really interesting Oscar season. I think there's many elements in the air, and we're going to touch on them today. So the 92nd Oscars, this will be it's going to be on February 9, 2020, Dolby Theatre in Los Angeles, California. That date's really interesting. February 9 is actually the earliest date in over a decade. Usually they have the ceremony later in the month of February. They're going to push it forward a bit. And I think what's really interesting about that is, and something we're going to talk about today, that I think like last year, a lot of films that are released earlier in a cinema year are getting that Oscar push, and usually that doesn't work that way. Usually Oscar season, October, November, December, that's when your Oscar films come out. But lately it's been a bit of a trend where films released in April, May, June, they're getting some a considerable push during Oscar season. So we're going to talk about some of those today. But before we do that, I want to talk to you about a bit of news in regards to Oscars hosts. And last award season, of course, we didn't have a host at the Oscars. There was a big controversy. And I shared an article with you from a few days back that pretty much said that the Academy Awards and the ABC broadcast team were actually quite happy with the flow of the show, and they're probably not going to have an Oscars host again next year. Now, your reaction to that in our message was very clear, and I want you to just talk about it now. So, Oscars host, do you think they're going to have one? And if not, is it a good or a bad idea?
Well, I won't swear, but my reaction was, you've got to be kidding. And then in capital letters, unbelievable. Because I thought we were done with that. I thought last year there was a reason because of the Kevin Hart debacle and what happened there. And the funny thing is, the Emmys weren't that long ago, and the Emmys went without a host. And that was something I did not realise until closer to the ceremony itself. They had like an announcer sitting in a booth that would do funny jokes every now and then in between awards nominations or presentations, but it didn't seem to work because a lot of the time the audience actually couldn't even hear it, and you couldn't hear it at home either. So the fact that you sent me that article that they were considering no host again, I mean, did it work that well? It worked okay at this year's ceremony, but did it work that well that we're not going to have another host? I find that ludicrous, considering the history of the Oscars and hosts in general.
It's interesting that you ask, did it work that well? I mean, depends on what metric we want to compare it to, I guess. I mean,
that's true.
Ratings-wise, it did. The ratings went up a little bit, and I think some of that had to do with curiosity more than anything else. I think this is the first time in a long time they didn't have a host, like a traditional, one or two people up there actually emceeing the event. And I think to me that the Academy really got burned this year in regards to the whole process of finding a host and just the reaction towards it. And I think they're going to approach it this year. If they are going to go with a host, their vetting is going to be much, much more deeper, much more precise than it was in previous years. They're going to be looking through. I could just imagine now actually a lot of potential candidates maybe wiping their social media history so nothing pops up in case of potential announcements. It could be the fact, though, Shane, that maybe people don't want to take on the job. I mean, if it's come down to a past history in regards to material, if you're a comedian, for example, if you've been a comedian for quite a while, maybe 10, 20 years, and humour back then is different than it is now, and just say a bit came up that might be deemed offensive now, and that's going to be used as a weapon against you, I think people might want to knock it back.
Yeah, I think it was the Hollywood Reporter or Variety. Don't quote me, but one of those trade papers that we read often. I know that they had an article about why people don't want to host anymore.
Yeah.
And they made good points about that. It's one, their history, because, that sent alarm bells with the Kevin Hart thing. You're right. I'm not, I didn't really think of that, but you're right. Celebrities would be checking their history now, their online history for that very reason and other things, who knows. And then you've got the entertainment side of it. It does kind of work where they just have certain presenters come out and do their thing. But again, it can be monotonous. But if you've got that one person who is the backbone of it all, or, a Jimmy Kimmel or, whoever it might be, that for me, maybe because I'm a traditionalist, works better than a non-host thing. So I really hope that it's just something that they've brought up, but they're not really considering zero host again this year or next year.
And I think a host also brings an amount of personality to the show, because you and I, we can talk about what happened at the Oscars, this past Oscar ceremony in 2019, and we can talk about who won and the campaigns and such. Can we really remember a bit? Can we really remember a moment on stage that happened? I mean, no. I think the only thing I can really think of as a moment on stage moment is the duet between Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper. That was a really great thing. It was a beautiful thing. But that thing would happen anyway with or without a host. I mean, that's just part of the ceremony. The original song contenders go up there and they sing. I mean, but with some ceremonies, some years, the personality of the MC really shines through. I mean, if you're talking Golden Globes, you talk about the Ricky Gervais years. If you're talking about, the Oscars, you talk about Billy Crystal and Steve Martin and all the people who did all that stuff there. I mean,
Whoopi Goldberg, fantastic.
Yeah, and even the ones that bombed. You can talk about David Letterman, the Anne Hathaway, James Franco debacle as well. Even the MCs, even the hosts that didn't do a good job, they left a mark on it. And I think that's something that I would like to see. I just want to have a show where someone just brings a little bit of personality in between the categories. But one thing that can be said about having no host, it did seem to go a little quicker than last time, and I think for some people they like idea. Yeah, for some people they like that, but for you and I, who really kind of revel in the night itself, and we talk about this stuff and it leads up to it. And I know you yourself, you host an Oscar party. You want to have that 3-4 hours that you can just get into stuff. So we're going to be on top of it every couple of weeks when we start talking about the Oscars and the award season. We're going to be on top of this, and we're gonna maybe we might even dedicate maybe half a show to who we think should be potential hosts. That could be an idea that we can get into.
I'd like to do that, because there are potentials, and then we can throw around some ideas. And there are serious actors that also can do comedy that could work, and then you've got your performers, your singers and dancers like Hugh Jackman,
yep,
as we mentioned. And I mean, we'll see. I hope we do a part, at least partial of an episode where we discuss that, because there are many out there that you could consider that would do a good job. And you brought up Letterman. I still go back and check out some of his stuff. It's excruciating bad, but it's still funny in the same sense.
That's right. It's like sometimes those car crashes have their own kind of humour to them. Okay, so what we're going to dedicate this episode to now, this is something we did last Oscar season, and I really enjoyed it, so I want to do the same now. So we're going to talk about the films that have been released this year, the films that we've seen, that we think have a potential to make a mark this upcoming award season. Now, I mentioned before in regards to the date of the Oscars of February 9, and I talked about how a lot of films are releasing early. And the films that we're going to talk about, I think I know from my list, a lot of them came out like March, June, July, around that time. Only one film is like a recent release. So I think that is going to be a new trend. I think we've seen Oscar campaigns re-releasing movies back in theaters to remind people about the films, and a lot of voters these days watch screeners So they're going to get a lot of screeners for movies released back in June and July, for example. So let's talk about what some of those potential films can be. So how about yourself, Shane? How about you go first and tell me about what your potential nominee could possibly be?
All right, I'm going to start off with one from left field, and it's a movie that I really enjoyed. But it was at the Sydney Film Festival when I saw The Souvenir.
Okay.
Did you catch The Souvenir?
I did not know. Please tell us more.
Tilda Swinton's daughter is in it, and it's a basic story of a film student in the 80s who becomes kind of linked and romantically involved with this mysterious dude, this guy that you never really know whether he's coming or going, whether he's honest or whether he's evil, and what intentions he has. But it's a character study, and it's got some retro edge to it, which I really liked. But it was a very solid movie that the last half an hour, the last 30 minutes stanza is not what you expect. And I liked it. And it got a bit of a standing ovation, and only a short one, but they really enjoyed it at the Sydney Film Festival. And I know film festival crowds are very different to a normal cinema crowd when they get released in general theatres. But yeah, I just thought I'd throw that one in as a dark horse because there has been people talking about it. It's been released in the UK already. So we'll see. The Souvenir, it's something that it's an art house film, but really well acted, directed, and something a little bit different.
I'm looking here. It's a British film, perhaps potentials for BAFTAs as well.
Yeah, well, it's got BAFTAs written all over it. Very Tilda's in it, but she's not the main actress here. It's her daughter, whose name is Tosin Kong.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, great film. Not going to say too much about it, but The Souvenir. Our listeners out there, if you come across it, trust me, you'll enjoy it, and it will take you somewhere at the end that'll cause some discussion.
Okay, very interesting. I'm going to put that on my list of films that definitely watch coming up now.
Well, I hope it gets a release because unless you know of a date, not too sure if it's got an Australian release.
I haven't heard yet, no, but if it's just only been released in the UK, hopefully it should be out here soon as well. If we're going to stick with Sydney Film Festival, I'm going to talk about the Sydney Film Festival winner, and that's Parasite. So this film still stands as my favourite film of the year so far. Boon Jong-ho is the director. He's a South Korean director. He's been around for a while. He's got a lot of great films to his name, such as Mother and The Host and Snowpiercer. So he has not been nominated previously in any facet, especially not as director. He did win the Palme d'Or for this movie, Parasite, when it played at Cannes Film Festival. And I think that he has this film has a real solid chance. Well, number one, I think foreign film, it's definitely a lock for a nomination in that category. But I think it has a really solid chance to kind of cross over, kind of like what Roma did last year. This year, earlier. And I think also he has the potential to get a directing nomination as well. And the kind of inspiration I get from to kind of like give some credence to my opinion here is I look at a director like Guillermo del Toro. He was a director that's been around for a long time. He's not American born, Mexican director, of course. And his films such as Pan's Labyrinth, Shape of Water, that was a big winner that year as well. I think he is a kind of filmmaker that you can definitely see Bong Joon-ho kind of replicate that kind of same kind of marketing campaign in regards to Oscar nominations for Parasite. And I don't know if you've seen Parasite, but I absolutely love it. Critic-wise, it still has 100% standing on Rotten Tomatoes. It just hit the US. People in the US love it as well. And I think he's really making a mark now. And the US release is really interesting. It's come out in all other territories way before the US one has. So I really do think that it's going to get a real major push behind it. And I can definitely see Best Picture, I could see Best Director, and I can potentially even see Screenplay. And I'm not exactly sure how foreign films go with screenplay nominations. But I think the themes in the movie really do resonate strongly, especially these days, and I can really see a big kind of push behind it.
I'm ashamed to say I have yet to see Parasite. I missed it at the Sydney Film Festival. It was playing at the Dendy and the Palace Cinemas in Sydney. I'm ashamed that I did not get to see it because you are among many people who have praised it. I've purposely avoided the trailer. And
don't watch anything. Don't watch.
No, I'm purposely avoiding everything I possibly can. So hopefully by the next time we speak, if it's released again or I get to see a screener or something, we'll be able to talk about it. But I hear nothing but good things, so I will back you on that and chase it up and try and watch it. But I mean, he did Snowpiercer, as you said, and he did The Host, which I really enjoyed. Okja as well, which I was a little bit sitting on the fence with, but overall, I know how solid a filmmaker Boone is. Now, do you think it'll get nominated for a Best Picture or just Best Foreign Film?
I think it's going to do both. I think it's going to, right now,
both. Okay.
I think it's going to get, I definitely think, and not only that, like even if this year the Oscars resorted back to the classic five picture nominee,
it's that good, is it?
I think it's that good. I think it has potential as well to even win. Not saying it will, but I think the film is that strong, and I think its themes really do resonate across all cultures, especially in the States right now. Its push behind it is really strong, and I can see this movie. When it comes to Oscars campaigning, I could see a lot of filmmakers really pushing hard for Bong Joon-ho to get a nomination. I could see directors such as Guillermo del Toro. I could see people like Scorsese, for example, like even his competitors. I can see them really kind of backing him to get that nomination because he has been around for a while, and this film really is exceptional. I can't wait for you to watch it because when you do, I think you and I will be talking about it quite a bit when it comes to discussing future categories. Shane, what have you got next on your list?
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
I got that too.
I cannot go past that. I mean, I had a feeling you might have it on your list too. There's too many superlatives that have already been said, so I don't want to go on and on about it, but it's about old school Hollywood. It has a galaxy of stars. It is brilliantly executed, written, directed, everything about it I absolutely loved. So I can't see it not being in the mix.
I agree 100%. I think it's Tarantino's strongest work since Pulp Fiction. I love Pulp Fiction. It's really interesting, nominees-wise, where things are going to fit. You got DiCaprio and Brad Pitt, two megastar powers on the screen together for the first time. Both have delivered really exceptional performances. But there's definitely going to be a split when it comes to lead and supporting nominees.
Yeah, exactly.
So I can definitely see Leo going for that lead category, which of course means Brad Pitt will go for supporting actor. But what's really interesting about that is that Brad Pitt, during press for at Astra, when asked about him being a potential Oscar nominee for his work in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he said he's will not campaign for it. He's going to abstain from campaigning. Now, whether that's going to have such an effect that he won't even be nominated, I'm not sure. I think that once voters see that screener again and see the strength of his work and Sony Pictures, I think this is going to be the movie they're going to really push forward this Oscar season. I really do see Brad Pitt being a front runner for the supporting category. Now, of course, every year there's 2 or 3 lead performances that go in that supporting category, and I think it's just a thing that happens. It's just a campaigning strategy more than anything else. Yeah. But I could definitely see DiCaprio. I could see Brad Pitt. I could see Tarantino getting director nom. He's been nominated twice before for directing and the last time was for Inglourious Bastards. And I think writing screenplay is in the cards too, which is kind of odd because out of all the films, maybe with the exception of Jackie Brown, which was based on other material, this was his less wordy, dialogue-driven.
It was, yeah.
So it's going to be it's interesting to see whether he gets a nom for writing as well. I think he will because he is Tarantino and the film's so good. But his other wins for Inglourious Bastards and was it Inglourious Bastards? No, Pulp Fiction and Django Unchained. They're very dialogue heavy films, as Tarantino films usually are. So it'd be very interesting to see whether he gets nominated there. What about Margot Robbie? You reckon she did enough in that movie to maybe get in the supporting actress category?
No, I don't. She was very good, but some of her scenes weren't that way inclined that that screams Oscar, if you know what I mean. Like, she was great, but no, I don't think so. Okay. If anything, Margaret Qualley, the young actress who played the hippie that Brad Pitt picked up and took back to the ranch, she could have a little bit more of a opportunity to get a look at than Margot, in my opinion, because there was some pretty good acting in that car, and then afterwards in the ranch, But there's so many individual little tiny performances. I liked Margot, don't get me wrong, but I don't think she'd be in the mix.
Very interesting stuff there. My next pick is going to be a film that came out way early in the year, I think March, and that's Rocket Man. So I'm basing a lot of this on the Bohemian Rhapsody triumph from the last Oscars.
But will it happen 2 years in a row? I'm not sure.
There is historical evidence to back it up, and the two films I'm going to mention to you is Ray and Walk the Line. So those were films that came out back to back. Walk the Line didn't win Joaquin Phoenix the Oscar, even though I think he gave the better performance when compared to Jamie Foxx in Ray. Jamie Foxx is terrific in Ray. A lot of that though was that he was though Jamie Foxx can sing, a lot of his stuff was lip syncing to Ray Charles's voice when it comes to the song parts, especially, which is something that Rami Malek, of course, did in Bohemian Rhapsody. Here you got Rocket Man, the story about Elton John, and what's really interesting about this movie is that the director Dexter Fletcher was actually brought in to do a lot of work on Bohemian Rhapsody after Bryan Singer was fired from the job. So this is kind of like, but the interesting thing about Rocket Man is that visually and the way that it approached the music biopic was so very different to what Bohemian Rhapsody did. Bohemian Rhapsody was very much by the numbers, start of the band, end of the band, ups and downs, what have you, where there's a fantastical element in Rocket Man, which worked really well. And I think Dexter Fletcher has to get a lot of kudos for that, because that kind of thing that Rocket Man did, where it took its music scenes and it didn't just do a straightforward Elton John at a piano doing a concert thing. There was a lot of elements going on here, a lot of fantastical kind of stuff, and I think he pulled it off quite well. And then you have Taron Egerton, and he is just such a talented actor. He can sing.
Oh yeah.
He actually well. He's been in genre films as well, action movies as well. And what he did with the Elton John performance was just fantastic, because that was his voice. That's him singing those songs. That's him on the soundtrack. And coupled with Elton John's story, the drug use, the sex addiction, all of that stuff that came with it, I think that there is definitely the elements there for Taron Egerton especially to get not a nomination in the Best Actor category. Whether the film coming out really, we're talking really early here. I think it was March that the film came out. I could be wrong. Whether that goes against it, I'm not sure. But I think Paramount will be amiss if they didn't at least try to get Taron on the board, because his performance is that strong.
Yeah, it was something like that. It was March, April. It was very early in the year, and it was a huge hit. And obviously people compared it to Bohemian, but it is, like you said, a totally different film. It doesn't cover the same structure. It shows like a life story, a biography, but it's done in a different way. Yep. You don't have that stage show at the end, and you have more fantasy sequences and dream sequences and musical performances that way. You're right with Taron. I guess we'll talk about him a little bit more when we discuss actors. But he's definitely someone who should be considered, because to me, he was pretty amazing. Like he was better than what Rami Malek was. If I had to compare the two, but they're different movies, so I really shouldn't be doing that. And Dexter Fletcher, yeah, he fixed up Bohemian Rhapsody and did what he had to do at the call of arms when things went down with Bryan Singer. But this was his movie, and he worked with Elton John up front, but then Elton left him alone to do it, and I just think the combination of Taron and Dexter and Elton were a great trio, and it was a good film. And yeah, I agree totally with what you said. I just always a bit worried about movies that get released earlier in the year, that even though people will still talk about them, they just get disregarded.
Very true. What's next on your list, Shane?
The Farewell.
Okay.
Now, it's not quite the Joy Luck Club, which was an amazing film, and of course Crazy Rich Asians after that more recently. This one is about another Chinese family and a grandmother matriarch who has been announced that she's going to pass away, but the family don't want to tell her. I don't know if you've seen this movie, but how they get around... Have you seen it?
I haven't, no.
Oh, how they get around not telling her. And then you've got Awkwafina, who is the one who's conflicted. She's the granddaughter who's conflicted and wants to tell her grandmother that she's going to pass away. But it's just a really lovely, wonderful story. It's PG rated, but it is just something that I think anyone who has family, either issues, good or bad, should watch it. It really does resonate. And the acting in it, I think the grandmother, I'm not sure of her name. She hasn't been in a film before. This was her first role. But Awkwafina, who is in Crazy Rich Asians and Ocean's 9, she's more of a comedian, but in this it's a serious role. And her combined with the plot, the storyline, and the beautiful Joy Luck Club of it all is what I'll compare it to, is worth, I think, Academy will take notice of it.
Just like yourself with Parasite, The Farewell is just a movie that just kind of passed me by. As a film I numerous times tried to go watch it, just didn't happen. Since the film came out kind of early, I know I'm going to get a chance to catch up on it. I'm pretty sure it's coming out soon in Blu-ray and such here in Australia, so I will definitely watch it. And I have been keeping a track on it, just like, as you know, the Oscar award seasons guy that I am, and Awkwafina's name keeps coming up quite a bit in regards to that lead actress category.
She's solid, man. She's really good.
And written and directed by Lulu Wang. I imagine there could be you reckon there could be possibilities of maybe an original screenplay as well?
I would say it could be talked about. I'm not sure. It's way too early for me to predict it. But yeah, I think the screenplay is one of its highlights, like one of its solid points. It's a beautiful story, but it's never condescending. And it also, because it's a Chinese family, it doesn't matter. It relates to whatever nationality you are. You just sort of need to see it. But you're right. I think a screenplay could be a possibility, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to make a pick for a film, a recent release. I mean, very recent. It came out last week, and that's Joker.
I knew you were going to... I was just about to jump in and say Joker, but I let you say it first.
I love this movie. It's a very contentious film, which kind of surprises me because, not to get off on a rant here, it kind of bums me out that so many film critics are kind of lambasting the film to the point where some are even saying that it's problematic in regards to its violence. Because, as I like to think that as film critics, we're kind of like guardians of the gate in regards to, once upon a time there were films that came out that a lot of people wanted to censor in regards, whether it's politicians or other type of authority bodies, and the film critics were the champions for those. So, but I'm just going to leave that aside. I'm going to make that rant for another day. I just want to talk about the potential in regards to nominees. I think right off the list, I think Joaquin Phoenix has really strong potential to not only be nominated, perhaps even to win. He's a 3-time nominee. Hasn't won before. He has won a Golden Globe for Walk the Line. And I think what he does with the Joker character in this movie is just devastatingly good. He does that thing that a lot of Oscar voters really like their lead actors to do, transform himself physically. He turns into this kind of like a wiry kind of jangle of bone and muscle and nerves, and it really kind of does something to him physically, which is manifest several times throughout the movie. And then also you have the character's fragile mental state as well, which I think he handled beautifully as well.
Oh yeah.
And I think it might be controversial to say, but I think it's the best portrayal of the Joker character I've seen yet on a big screen. And I love the Jack Nicholson version. I love the Heath Ledger version. But there's the thing that what's with this film is that there's a grounding to it, that the world building that this movie has, that kind of evoking of that early 1980s, late 1970s New York City, that grimy kind of really
Taxi
driver, king of New York, unpredictable, wild, mean streets. You know, any moment someone could come out and like kill you. Kind of New York City that a lot of people, you know, grew up watching on the big screen. It kind of it evokes that world and does so really well. And I think the themes in the film are really strong. I love Todd Phillips' direction in the movie. I don't think, however, that it's strong enough to get him an Oscar nomination.
No, I don't think so.
But maybe a screenplay, I'm not sure. I mean, we have seen in the past R-rated comic book movies like Logan, for example, get an Oscar nomination for adapted screenplay. So maybe that could be potential, but I definitely think in regards to production design, it could be something there. But performance-wise for Joaquin Phoenix, I think there's a strong possibility he could get nominated number 4, and perhaps even his first win. Shane, what do you think? Have you seen Joker, and what would you think of my predictions in regards to that film?
I saw it on a preview. I don't know. I think you were there on the same night.
Right.
Yep. And then I saw it when it was released on that Thursday. So I've seen it twice now. And before I say my thoughts, what did you think of Jared Leto as Joker?
I wasn't a fan.
Okay.
Not to say that he didn't.
Yeah, I liked him.
Not to say that he didn't give spirited performance in it. I just think that the direction that they were going with that Joker character is kind of like a pimp kind of character, with the tattoos and all that thing and all that other stuff. I think out of all the ones I've seen on the big screen, it's definitely the weakest. And actually, it's funny you said that, because supposedly reports have come out that said that he was really upset that this movie went ahead, because he had I'm not sure if he imagined it or whether there has been some type of deal struck that any type of potential reprisal of the character would be for him and him alone. Clearly, this movie, for people who haven't seen it, it's very much a separate kind of world thing. It isn't a shared universe thing whatsoever with this Joker.
No.
And I really do hope that they don't go down that road. I hope they leave it alone as a one-off, because it should be treated as that. But, you know, I wasn't a big fan of the Jared Leto one, but that's, again, not to say that he didn't put like a really great kind of effort into it. I just think that the choices made creatively for how Joker was reprised in that movie just didn't really do anything for me.
Yeah, no, I was interested in what you thought, because, I mean, I wasn't a Suicide Squad fan, but I thought Jared's performance was one of the highlights in a movie that I really didn't care much for. And that makes sense about reprising it, because, you know, whenever an actor signs on to do one of these big budget, superhero style films, whether it be Marvel or DC, it's in their contract. Like, they sign on for that first movie, but then if it goes over a certain amount of money or things happen, they're there for the sequels. Whether the producers use them or not, that's up to them, but they're still obligated to be in a sequel if the producers want them. And you're right, Joker is a standalone film, although without giving away spoilers, they do refer to some things towards the end there.
Yep.
That was my only downfall of the movie. there's certain things that they referred to and little incidences and scenes that happened. There's only 2 of them, but that was my only downfall. And if you remember probably this time last year, I was mentioning Joaquin in Mary Magdalene when he played Jesus. And don't worry, he won't go far on foot, which was another movie I saw at the previous Sydney Film Festival. He's just so in his whole career. He's in the depth of the character, and Joker is just unbelievable. And I said this in all my radio reviews and newspaper reviews, that within the first 15 minutes of when he comes on screen as Arthur Fleck in Joker, you knew he was going to be nominated. That cackle, the way he was walking, the way he was holding himself, you knew that he has to get nominated for this. Whether he wins or not, I don't know. But I've got to agree that it's on my list as well. Like, it's a really, really solid film, and there's so many layers to it. I liked it, but it's hard to recommend to people because it is so depressing. Yeah,
and I think that is a really good point as well, because I think you and I think in regards to the tone of the film and the look of it, we've grown up watching movies where clearly it evokes that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
And so we're used to that thing. Other people, just say maybe, I don't know, the 21-year-old who watched Avengers Endgame and really liked that movie, might not so much get into the kind of the wavelength of it. But for myself, I think it's one of the strongest comic book movies I've seen in quite some while, because, like I said, it's not like a shared universe thing. It does have a really grounding in the reality, and just the things that it talks about and the way that it approaches it and the overall impact it has. To me, it was a very visceral kind of experience. I was really sucked into this world, and it made me feel uncomfortable, but uncomfortable in a good way. You can watch films and feel uncomfortable and leave it thinking that it was an experience and not a particularly horrific one, even though sometimes horror films can do that as well, but one that can have you think a little bit and leave an impression on you. And that film definitely did that with me, and hopefully it will do the same with Oscar voters. What's next on your list, Shane?
One more for me, and that is Toy Story 4.
That's on my list too.
It has to be. Come on, Matt. I mean, it came out earlier in the year. It is just it. I don't think we've already spoken about it. Maybe we have, but I didn't have a lot of expectations for it because, Toy Story 3 was just like the perfect ending. And did we need another one? Is it another case of, milking the box office for the old, retro characters, bring them back again? But honestly, Toy Story 4 is better than Toy Story 3. Yeah. I loved it so much. And it has to be a contender. It literally just has to be. It was flawless. It was like my perfect movie of the year so far.
We did talk about before when we did our half yearly best and worst so far. And when we talked about it, I also said that I liked it better than number 3 as well, and that I too wasn't sure how they were going to approach it, because 3 had that perfect bookend, and everyone loves a trilogy, etc. But I also said that when it came to animated films released this year, and we're going to go way back to a release that came out in January, February, that to me, my favourite animated film I've seen so far, and probably stay there, is the latest How to Train Your Dragon movie.
Yep.
And I think, just like Toy Story, I think this is going to be a battle between those two movies. And I personally would love to see How to Train Your Dragon get that Oscar, because Pixar and especially the Toy Story films, they clean house every single time that award category comes up. So this year, I would like to, or next year, even though I have so much affection for Toy Story 4 and believe it to be one of the better, if not one of the best films in that franchise, to me, How to Train Your Dragon Part 3 was just such a fantastic movie. And that also had that emotional wallop to it as well. Great animated design, great voice work as well. So I think those two films are definitely going to go one-on-one. No doubt there's going to be a third nominee as well. Probably would be some type of obscure kind of maybe hand-drawn animation. I noticed lately that happens quite a bit now. There's films that in the animated category that aren't, made for the multiplexes. They're like small little art house films that get in there.
Or a Japanese anime.
Correct, that as well. So there'll probably be potential for those ones, but for me, that is going to be the battle between them two. Do you think, though, that I know Toy Story... I'm pretty sure Toy Story 3 did get a breakthrough into the Best Picture nominee. Do you think any of these animated films has the potential to do that this year?
Oh, look, Toy Story 4 could. I mean, I agree with you that How to Train Your Dragon, it was 3, wasn't it? It was the third one.
Yes.
Yeah, of the series. I loved it too. But, I mean, I think a little bit less of it than you do. But I hear where you're coming from. They're both equal, pretty much equal when it comes to quality and aspirations of just people who watch these movies, young and old, who either get into the characters themselves or look at the animation. Like there's so many different elements that you can enjoy this state-of-the-art animation renaissance that we're going through at the moment. But as much as you say about these little animated ones that sometimes sneak through and get a nomination, let's not forget Frozen 2.
Mm-hmm.
That is out in November, mate.
Yeah.
If it's anything like the trailers suggest, which it looks like they're going to be darker, it looks really good, but they're not giving away too much. And you know how the first one sprung on everyone and it surprised everyone and it just became a phenomenon. It ran in the cinemas literally for about 12 months. They were playing like the sing-along version 12 months later. So we'll see. We'll talk about it more as we do more of these Oscar podcasts, but let's not forget Frozen 2.
That, really interesting you brought it up. I kind of forgot about that film.
How can you? I'm seeing it everywhere at the moment.
It's a good point. Like I got boys as well around the age range where they love that kind of film. So I don't know why I forgot about that film. I just did. But yeah, that's really interesting to see whether that is going to also, and it probably will make an impact as well. So I think the animated film category is going to have some competition come next Oscar season. My last pick is going to be for Avengers Endgame. And this is going to be really interesting for me because I don't think this film will be nominated for the film that it is, but rather what it represents, which is it's the culmination of this, 10, 11 year journey in the cinemas. And I'm going to come back to that word soon, cinema, in regards to this movie as well. And I think the campaign behind this that Disney are going to put together is going to be big. I think they're going to push it really hard. It is the highest grossing film of all time, so they've got the money there to do it with. So they're definitely going to.
Is it bigger than? It's bigger than Titanic, isn't it?
It beat Avatar, it beat Titanic. The methods that they did it's quite shrewd. A lot of re-releasing, a lot of promises
3D.
of 3D, a lot of promises of additional footage, which turned out to be nothing really. I mean, maybe a few minutes here, a few minutes there, but nothing of real significance. And also, I think that when we look to was it last year or the year before when Black Panther was nominated? I'm just trying to think now. I think it was last Oscar season. Yeah. So if Disney can get Black Panther into the mix and into Best Picture consideration, I think that they definitely have the resources, they definitely have the money to do the same with Avengers Endgame. And like I said, I think it's because of I like the film myself. I thought it was terrific comic book superhero filmmaking. But just the fact that it wraps things up, it's a culmination of this whole kind of cinematic universe. I can foresee that maybe that's going to be the angle that the campaign's going to take. This is the culmination of a film universe that has put billions of dollars into the coffers of the movie industry. And whether that works or not, I'm not sure. There could be backlash because Disney owns everything now, that maybe people are going to go, you know what, screw that. You guys have got the box office receipts, you're not going to get the nominations as well, and they might not nominate that for it. But I would like to see whether they would put forward someone like, say, Robert Downey Jr. for his portrayal of Tony Stark in Iron Man up for consideration. Now, just like Brad Pitt, he's recently come out. He was on the Howard Stern show, and he said that there has been rumblings in Disney about pushing him for like a supporting actor nomination and he said no, he doesn't want it. And that's really interesting. It's really interesting, isn't it? How some of these usually people would just love to get nominated and go out there and campaigning. You know, Brad Pitt and Robert Downey Jr. They're very content in their life, no doubt, and they've made all the money in the world and can do any project that they want to do. And nominations clearly don't have any effect on them. And the Academy getting younger as well, that could also have an effect on whether this
and more diverse
as well, and a lot of the people involved in the movie, like we're talking about like a 12, 15 strong cast as well. They could get behind it and do some type of campaigning if they wish to. But what's really interesting is whether that's going to clash with the old guard who might view Avengers Endgame as just a silly superhero film and not necessarily cinema. And I just want to get back to that word now because I'm sure you saw it as well. Martin Scorsese, during an interview, I think it was with GQ, but I could be wrong.
Yes.
He actually said that to him, superhero movies and all superhero movies, a lot of people were just saying Marvel films, but for him, superhero movies were not cinema, but they were more kind of theme park rides. And he made his definition of cinema was very kind of precise of what he said cinema was to him, and there was films that have a spiritual value driven kind of thing to them. And whether a film like Black Panther and Guardians of the Galaxy, etc., or Avengers Endgame has that is really subjective. It's really up to the people who watch it. You might be making a very good point though, because these movies, like I said, are a conglomerate. They're filmmaking by committee. While the Russo brothers are the directors on the film, they don't get to do what they want to do without Kevin Feige and Disney telling them what to do. Which is different to, say, a Martin Scorsese film or a Steven Spielberg movie. They call the shots there, or a Tarantino movie. So that's it's going to be really interesting to see whether Disney really do push all chips in the table and try to get nominations for the film, because after all, you know, Avatar, Star Wars, these films, these big pop culture themes, when they came out, they've been nominated for Best Picture. And whether Avengers Endgame will get there as well, I'm not sure, but I think there's a potential that it could.
All right, so as much as I respect you, I knew this time was coming. I haven't even seen Little Women yet. But if Little Women's nominated for a Best Picture nomination and Endgame is right next to it, I know which one's going to win. I just don't think so, man. Like if it is, it's just it'll be like a system where they push it enough that they just put it in because it's there. It's in front of their faces, like Black Panther, and I know we've had disagreements about that the last time we talked about Oscars. And when it comes to Robert Downey Jr., look, I love the guy, don't get me wrong. I've been watching him since the 80s. But if he can get nominated, I don't think he's going to get nominated for this. I really don't. And good for him if he does. But if he can get nominated for Tropic Thunder, he can get nominated for this. So anything's possible. Look, mate, I'm not a superhero aficionado by any stretch of the imagination, but I see all the movies more than once, mostly, and I like them a lot, but I'm not invested. And to think it's going to get an Oscar outside of the usual sound or editing or special effects side of things, no, I don't think so, mate. But I'm glad that you think so, because that'll give us something to argue about.
I think the possibility could be there. Really depends, though, on how many Best Picture nominees they're going to have in there. If they go to the full 10, for example, I think the potential for it increases quite a bit. I mean, it can get in that 9-10 range and get that nomination. But if it's just, say, 7, 8 movies, I'm not sure. Like, I'm putting it out there just because of when it comes to the campaigning itself, a lot of that is money driven, a lot of that is resources driven, and the biggest player in the game right now when it comes to all the studios is Disney.
Yeah.
You know? And so if they can put something together and push the film forward, combine that with the younger demographic and much more diverse demographic in the Academy now. And also, don't forget, last Oscar season, remember how they were kind of pushing that best movies feature as well? And the reason they were doing that, you and I theorised, and a lot of people too, was because they wanted to get people who were watching these summer blockbuster movies to watch the Oscars. I think also there could be incentive there, maybe from the Academy, if ratings and if that kind of thing was something that, you know, is still important to them, that maybe, you know, a little bit of a, you know, nudge towards getting Avengers Endgame in there could happen. Not saying it's going to. I'm actually less confident in an Endgame getting in there than Black Panther was. Black Panther I was in all the way from the beginning, and a lot of the reason why I said that is because it has a narrative to it in regards to, you know, the cultural aspect of the whole thing, which Avengers Endgame just does not have. I mean, it doesn't have that whatsoever. And I think that kind of stuff really helps. But I'm really interested in keeping an eye on what Avengers Endgame does. Because look, I could be saying the same thing in regards to the new Star Wars film, you know, as well. But I'm not saying that's going to have it either. But you know, I just think that these days we've seen a bit of a trend towards genre movies, especially superhero films, getting a certain amount of acceptance from awards bodies that they never had before. And superhero movies aren't going away. And whether that's a good thing or not, I'm not sure. Whether they're cinema or not, we can have different opinions towards that. But whether they are now deemed Oscar worthy, I think that narrative is getting clearer and clearer as every award season passes. And I think we're going to see definite confirmation in regards to that with this upcoming Oscar season.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. I mean, you're right, and I don't want to sound like a whinger here, but you're right when you say that superhero movies are not going away. But at least this year, and maybe next year, they're more separated. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like they're not every 3 or 4 weeks like we've had in the past. You know, there's been so many. That's probably a bit extreme, 3 or 4 weeks, but there's been so many. I think if they space them out, and it's going to take a lot to get a franchise going again that built up that 10 years of Avengers that they did. So we'll see. And I'm glad if they keep the quality going. And I'm Kevin Feige. I've got high hopes with him staying around and bringing up new stories. And that's what we want, new diverse stories.
And with that, let's wrap up our podcast today. First one in the books for the 2019-2020 awards season. And look, I think with the predictions we made today with potential nominees, it'll be really interesting to see in like the several months from now when those nominees finally are revealed. Have a look back and just see whether some of these early releases actually made the cut.
I hope so.
Before we do that, before we leave, Shane, why don't you tell the people where they can find you on social media?
Well, if you anyone interested in reading interviews or seeing red carpet photos and all my movie-related stuff is on Instagram or Twitter, and the handle is @movie_analyst. So @movie_analyst.
And for everyone listening, you can find the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Make sure that you subscribe, leave a rating, leave a review. Until next time, Shane, take care and happy movie watching.
Yep, you too, mate. Take it easy. Thanks for having me.